Welcome back to Sunday Vibes, one and all. As you can tell, we're not in the Phoenix pub this week. We're shooting it from home because of the bank holiday, and there was also a Football Daily team night out. So there are a couple sore heads in the room. But Doogie Critchley, Patrick Van Straten join me today. Doogs, how are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. I was on that team night out. It was very fun. We did a bit of cricket in Fulham. Henry did a bit of Paolo Nutini. It was a great evening, actually. But yeah, excited for Sunday Vibes today. How are you guys doing?
Good, Pat. How are you, mate?
I'm all right. I've brought a snorkel this week because last week there were so many the tears of Wolves fans. I was drowning in them. So yeah, I'm gonna have to strap on my scuba gear this week. But I'm good. I'm currently at my in-laws' place. So different backdrop. How are you? I heard that you caught a bollocking from a Premier League manager this week.
I did. From Steve Cooper.
Not your first.
Rather naughty. Not my first, and probably not my last, to be honest with you, from Steve Cooper. But, we resolved it in the end. What a lovely bloke. So, fingers crossed, they get a result against Tottenham at the weekend. That's all I'm going to say, for a number of different reasons, but mainly because I want Forest to beat Tottenham. Let's go on to today's title.
When are you going to do a We Need to Talk that's just ranking every Premier League manager you've been bollocked by?
That would be a good video as well.
Dyche.
Good video. And the Dyche would be far and away top because that was a rattling. All right, let's move on to today's topic, which is about predicting deadline day business. The window is rapidly coming to a close, and we're going to do all 20 teams today. Which is going to be some effort, and Christopher Hamill has put some research down for us in here by going onto Twitter and asking you guys at home, fans of each club, to say who you want and who's likely, maybe who's going to go out on loan. So we're going to go through each team and assess the options available, starting dead last with West Ham. No goals, no wins at the moment, but the fans' choice, according to Morgs WHU, Lucas Paqueta. What do you think of Lucas Paqueta to West Ham, Dukes?
I like it. I like it a lot. I mean, I've been a little bit surprised how little Moyes has used those new signings so far. We've seen Scamacca come off the bench in most of the Premier League games. Maxwell Cornet's not really featured as well. But Lucas Paqueta is an excellent player. Really bounced back well from that difficult spell at AC Milan. I think they signed him for 20 million euros. There's talk about a 40 to 50 million euro bid from West Ham, or maybe that's in pounds actually, so even more in euros. But he's done exceptionally well at Lyon, particularly last year. He's a bit more of a goal scorer than a creator per se, but he also works exceptionally hard. I think he ranks in the top 10% for pressures and tackles as well. But we have seen a lot of West Ham's signings above sort of that £30 million bracket not really work particularly effectively. The likes of Felipe Anderson, Seb Haller, they haven't had a particularly successful hit rate when spending a lot of money. But I do think Lucas Paqueta is the sort of player they should be going for. There's been talk about the fact that Thomas Souček has not started the season particularly well, that he slows down a lot of West Ham's build-up because he's not particularly good on the ball. So maybe they could play Paqueta alongside Rice, or they could play Paqueta in that sort of full Niles role off Antonio or Scamacca as well. And as I said, he chipped in with a lot of goals for Lyon last year. Lyon aren't really going anywhere particularly quickly under Peter Bosz, so it might be a good time for him to move. I'm just quite surprised that, given he was linked to the likes of Arsenal, he's been linked to Juventus in the past, that West Ham, if they get this done, we're able to get this one done, because he has been linked to some top clubs throughout the summer. But I think he's an excellent player, and he'd definitely improve Moyes' options going forward.
Yeah, I like his versatility as well for West Ham. That ability, like you said, to play in sort of an 8, a 10 role as well, can play off flank too. The Thomas Souček stuff is really interesting at West Ham because I feel like the narrative has really turned against Thomas Souček in the last 6 months from West Ham fans, where he was almost like a cult hero at one stage. Now I see fans kind of berating him online, saying he should be nowhere near the first team. Obviously, I think he scored last night, didn't he? But he gets an absolute peppering online, Thomas Souček, of West Ham fans demanding for him not to start. So I would imagine that Lucas Paqueta if he does come in at £50 million, is a nailed-on starter. That would be, I believe, a record signing for West Ham. So if he does come in, it might be for Thomas Souček. Pat, what do you think of Paqueta in, Souček out?
I mean, I don't think it's necessary to get Souček out. They still don't have an awful lot of depth in central midfield, despite bringing in Flynn Downs. If Paqueta arrives, then you want the option to be able to play him as an attacker as well as on the left side of midfield, which is where he's played, mostly at international level. you certainly don't want to be in a situation where you're relying on your first 11 to go through 50 games again, which is pretty much what happened last season. And towards the end of the year, we just saw that West Ham were gassed. In fact, in All or Nothing, you see the episode when Arsenal are playing West Ham late in the season, and Arteta says at half-time, these guys have got nothing in the tank. They can't end up in that position again. So I don't think getting Souček out is particularly important. But Paquetá, this is exactly the sort of move you make at the end of the window. You know, it's a guy who is good enough to play at the highest level, really. He's good enough to play at Champions League level. He's fantastic end product as an attacker when he plays in midfield. Big defensive output, great progressive passing. And these are the guys you can pick up when, you know, towards the end of summer, nobody's coming big for them. Maybe the other clubs are focused on kind of other deals going on. Like, you can go and get somebody like Paquetá. It would be an incredible coup, I think, for West Ham, and very exciting statement for the future, you know, because then you're looking at Bowen, Paquetá, Scamacca. Like, this is the heart of a great side, even if Rice eventually leaves. So I'd be really positive about this. And to be honest with you, I think West Ham are fine.
Yeah,
West Ham have scored like 0 goals from like 4 or 5 XG. Like, this is gonna rebound. It's not gonna last forever.
Yeah, the squad is still really strong, man. Like, it's still really strong. Let's move up to 19th though and chat about Leicester City, who are in a little bit more problematic areas than West Ham, I would suggest. This one came in from Arya Manuchin, who says they want Nicolas Pepe, who they want shot of. Well, the list is fairly long, isn't it? Perez, Dennis Pratt, Soyuncu also being mentioned in there. But Leicester have quite a lot of problems at the moment with squad. I see loads of people talking about, you know, they need to sell because of a financial reason. I think the main reason that Leicester need to sell is because of the squad size. At the moment, they've got 25 senior players in that squad, and they simply cannot add players to a team without basically having to drop somebody from the Premier League matchday squad. We saw last year Non-Police Mendy have to take the full and not be part of the squad. That can't happen again to Leicester City with any of their players. So they need to sell before they buy, for sure, just because of squad capacity, before we even get on to the financial implications for Leicester City. So I would expect to see quite a few players leave before deadline day. Obviously, lots of talk about Wesley Fofana still going out the door. I think Chelsea supposed to be bidding around £75 million this week, according to Fabrizio Romano, which is an absolutely astronomical amount of money. Yuri Tielemans still being benched, hasn't played, or didn't play last weekend, of course, from the start. So that seems to be a problem that needs to be resolved. There's a lot of problems at Leicester City, and the transfers just don't seem to be happening quick enough, dudes.
Yeah, I think they'll really want the end of the window, to be honest, because that speculation around Fofana and Tielemans has really sort of derailed their start to the season. I think they are bottom on expected points as it stands. I know they played Arsenal in there as well, but yeah, it's been a pretty tragic start to the season, and a pretty tragic summer, to be totally honest. I think when you're starting Daniel Amate at centre-back in the Premier League, it's just not his position, and he's not a particularly good centre-back. It's no particular disrespect to him, you know, he's just playing out of position, but they're really paying the price for that really mediocre summer last year, where they signed a lot of players. Vestergaard, Ryan Bertrand, of course, Soumaré as well, none of whom worked out. And now they're just, as you say, you know, dealing with a bloated squad. I think one player they could potentially look at if they want to improve at centre-back, although I'm not even sure that's the player they're going to look at, or the area they're going to look at, rather, because they, you know, Soyuncu and Evans, when fully fit, it's not too bad a duo. But Everton Dicker from Eintracht Frankfurt, he's a player we talk about in Continental Club quite often, but he's got 1 year left on his deal, can play in a back three, can play in a back four as well. Really promising young Frenchman as well. I think he's about 23 as well. Excellent on the ball, you know, solid in the tackle, etc. Everything you kind of look for a centre-back as well. And just 1 year left on his deal. Was linked with Juventus earlier in this summer, but nothing materialised there. They're still short of quite a few centre-backs, Juventus as well. But Leicester, it's just a little bit worrying. And that Fofana price is ridiculous, but at the same time, really destabilising for the rest of the club, that. And it's just rumbled on for far too long. They need to either sell him or get him to start turning up to training.
Yeah, let's move on up the table again then to Wolves. Pat, get the snorkel out from Kieran Hughes here. He says the fans' choice is Kaladzic. Of course, that's a Kaladzic being heavily linked with a move. I think a bid has gone in for him. Another 6'7" striker. So, you know, Voot's out. Sasa is in potentially. Do we like Kaladzic to Wolves? Feels like they do need a presence in the box if Jimenez is not going to be fully fit this season.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is a great move. I genuinely love this move. I mean, he gives you the aerial presence that Raul Jimenez gives you, but he's also historically been a very good presser, and he's pretty versatile as a threat, both a shooting threat and a creative threat. This season, started 3 games, he's got 3 assists so far. Last year, he was injured quite a bit, didn't play a huge amount, but his XG numbers have been pretty solid in a side that only came up, back to the top flight a couple of years ago. I really like this player, if you look at his shots, it's really interesting. He went from 2.8 shots to 2.6 shots, and it's a very small sample this season, but he's at 1.9 shots. On the other hand, he was gone from 0.9 key passes to 1.5 key passes, and now he's over 2. So it seems like there is a bit of a changing role going on here. And I do think having a forward in there who can facilitate those wide goal scorers is going to be really, really helpful for Wolves. I think this is a great move. It depends how expensive it is, but every fee we've seen bandied around with Kaladzic is kind of in the 25 mil, sub 25 mil range. That to me is pretty great. I think he's 24. I don't think he's 25 yet. Yeah, I think
he might literally have just turned 25 a couple of days ago. Very, very recently, though.
Yeah, I really like this one, and I think Wolves have actually done a really good job changing the age profile of their squad, because it was only a couple of years ago that we were kind of like, well, they've got some good young players, but some of their guys are getting up there. Well, this summer they've really turned that over by bringing in Collins, by bringing in Nunes, by apparently bringing in Kaladzic. So I kind of feel I'm quietly quite bullish about Wolves. So long as they can link the midfield to attack, I think they'll be okay. And definitely last season, the drop-off for a while with them from Jimenez to Fabio Silva up front, or to whatever front formation they've played, has been so stark. So just bringing in, even a league average striker, I think would make such a huge difference to them.
Yeah, and just the depth as well. I thought Gonzalo Ramos against Tottenham looked really dangerous as well. Got a lot of shots off from inside the box, didn't he? And I was slightly surprised to see Mateus Nunes being as advanced as he was too. So I wonder whether that's going to be a slightly different role to the role he had at Sporting, because he's going to have Ruben Neves and João Coutinho in there to cover some of his defensive output too. Let's move up again then to Everton, who, just a little bit all over the place with their business yet again. Unsurprisingly, this one sent in by Cameron Brace. The fan's choice is Armando Broja, but we have seen today that Neil Maupay is having a medical at the club, set to sign a 4-year contract. And apparently Cameron also wants shot of Andre Gomes. Now, obviously, they need forward reinforcements here, don't they, with Dominic Calvert-Lewin being injured, Richarlison off, and the fact that Anthony Gordon, there's still big question marks hanging over his head. Neil Maupay is an interesting one, because off the ball, we know how brilliant he is. Still in the top 10% of players for pressures across Europe in that forward area. But in and around the box, the question marks remain. I think in terms of strikers' output, in terms of expected goals, non-penalty expected goals, he's in the bottom 10% of strikers across Europe. And there's been persistent questions from Brighton fans about his ability to hit the back of the net, which would worry me if I was an Everton fan, because they need goals, and I don't see where the goals come from. I don't know what you think of Neil Maupay, Dukes, but I also want to ask you about Anthony Gordon, because I think it's absolutely bizarre that they haven't snapped Chelsea's hand off for that £60 million bid. That is an incredible amount of money for Anthony Gordon, who has scored 4 Premier League goals. 3 of them have been deflections, by the way. I think he's a good player, but I don't think he's better than Callum Hudson-Odoi. I don't think he's better than Christian Pulisic. So I think it's a bizarre bit of business from the Blues, but Everton should have snapped the hand off.
Yeah, I mean, I can't believe it either, to be honest. As you say, I don't think he's better than Pulisic, Ziyech, Hudson-Odoi. So if Tuchel wants to play him as one of his wing-backs, I don't really see it. If he wants to play him as one of his inside forwards, I don't think he's got the output to improve Chelsea in the short term. Maybe he will blossom into another sort of dynamic, sort of, hard-working sort of Mason Mount-esque figure, maybe playing a bit wider than Mason Mount, but I just really don't see it on his current performances. He's probably been one of Everton's better players in the last 2-3 years, or 2 years in particular, but that's not really saying anything. And as for Neil Maupay, he's one of the sort of Premier League villains in a way. He's got that sort of competitive streak in him. which they probably, need a bit of nastiness maybe now since Richarlison's left. They're a bit soft to play against, I think, Everton, and a bit toothless up front as well. But Neal Maupay, he's not a prolific striker. They're also linked with Che Adams. Again, not a really prolific striker. They're just sort of muddling along, and I don't think their business is going to get them out of this relegation battle anytime soon. So I'm still fairly confident with my prediction that they might actually go down this year. And I do actually like their recruitment at the back. I think Tarkowski and Cody, reasonable recruits at the back. And if they get Yerry Mina back fit again, and Ben Godfrey will come back at some stage, their centre-backs are looking pretty well stocked with Mason Holgate in there as well. It's just that lack of goals, and I don't think Neal Maupay really answers that. Consistently underperforms his expected goals as well.
Yeah, I do worry for Lamps a little bit. I really am. Let's move up to their Merseyside rivals then, sitting so low in the table. You can't believe it. Liverpool. Now, this was sent in by Mukhtar, and he says the fans' choice is Nico Barrea. Who they want shot of is Naby Keita, and any other business is to loan out Curtis Jones. So, for me, this makes no sense, Mukhtar. It's a horrible suggestion from you to bin two midfielders when the midfield is already looking incredibly thin. I do think that a central midfielder should be signed before the deadline. I know the idea behind Liverpool is not to panic and really focus on their targets, but right now it does look thin. Pat, do you agree with me? Do you disagree?
No, I completely agree. I mean, we should probably talk a little bit about the United-Liverpool game here. And the midfield just was incredibly porous. Like, don't get me wrong, pretty much the entire Liverpool team had an off day. Trent had the worst game I've seen from him in a while. The attack looked pretty toothless. Milner, though, is just cooked. Like, I think it's as simple as that. It kind of is that way. And Henderson and Elliott, I think Michael Cayley talked about this. He said that Man United attempted 7 take-ons, 7 dribbles against Henderson and Elliott and completed all 7. That's kind of troubling. Now, obviously, Fabinho is actually fully fit. I thought he looked horrible when he came on. He didn't really look at the races at all, and maybe it's just because of the state of the game at that point. But if Fabinho's fit, then that'll be kind of fine. That'll boost things up. But Henderson at this point is not much of a defender. Elliott is a very young player and isn't really a defender. Milner just doesn't look at it. So I think this is completely correct that the problem zone is central midfield. But I agree, you don't get rid of these guys at all. Curtis Jones is a proven contributor. He's a very, very good passer and he works pretty hard off the ball. Keita, you have in there just for legs. If you can get Barella, go and get Barella. But I'm not really convinced that you can get Barella.
Yeah.
And also Barella, what Barella is not, is a defender. Barella is like a zone mover who's going to burst into the box. I think they have those players. Like my issue would be, how do we cover for Fabinho if he's injured? What happens if Thiago and Fabinho are injured at the same time? Well, what happens is we get incredibly porous in the midfield. So I would be.
And I've got a suggestion for you, Pat.
Yeah?
I've got a suggestion for you. I think they should be the team that's in for Frankie. I think that Frankie would be a sensational option for Liverpool. And I think that if Liverpool were the side to come in for Frankie, he's obviously saying no to Manchester United because, Champions League's all a mess there at the moment. But I think if Liverpool were to come in for him, it'd be a totally different conversation.
Yeah, I think that would be an interesting one, actually. Because there's obviously been this thought that they're going to go in for Bellingham next year. But to the tune of about 120 mil, it feels like you can get Frankie for half that. And I think that's a pretty good deal. Obviously the issue is that then you've got Thiago and Frankie who both want to control the game in similar ways. You might want a bit more of a final third player, but of course Thiago can push up and play that role. Yeah, sure. Go ahead and get Frankie de Jong. He's going to be more gettable than Barella, and he's certainly good enough for Liverpool, and that would be the issue for me. So I'm not... They can afford to wait till next summer, but I don't think they're going to win the Premier League this year. I don't think they're going to win the Champions League either, just because of the midfield, essentially. So, I don't know. If Frankie's gettable, then get him.
Moving on to Bournemouth next, above Liverpool in the table, but probably not for long. Cole Jacob suggests Japhet Tanganga. Now, they do definitely need a centre-back. Still not got one through the door. Obviously, we saw Nat Phillips leave, and we saw Gary Cahill leave. A lot of people take at Gary Cahill, but did play a lot of minutes last season, was an influential figure in the dressing room, so I'm still surprised not to see Nat Phillips return to the club. For one, maybe that's because he has got an appearance for Liverpool this season. Japhet Tanganga to Bournemouth, Dukes. I think that's an unlikely one, given that AC Milan are fairly interested, aren't they?
Yeah, that was going to be my point. I think Milan have been talking about bringing him in on loan, and if you get the option to, work under Stefano Pioli, the Scudetto winners, under, the watchful eye of Paolo Maldini, who's the technical director there, learn from Fikayo Tomori, who's probably England's form centre-back so far this season, then I think you definitely take that option. It's an amazing opportunity to go live in Milan for a year, further your game, probably be back up to Tomori and Kalulu to start the season, but maybe if he puts together some form in the games that he gets, then maybe he could displace Kalulu. They've still got Simon Kjaer as well, so we can learn off him, such an experienced defender. So I think Tanganga to Bournemouth is incredibly unlikely. I thought they could have maybe looked at someone like Courtney Howes as well from Aston Villa, who got a move this week as well. But they have made some interesting moves, Bournemouth. I was really surprised they managed to sign Senesi from Feyenoord. But it's going to be incredibly difficult. I've been actually pleasantly surprised with the level of their performances so far. But yeah, they're right in amongst it in terms of a scrap this year.
Philip Jones, deadline day. Watch this space. Let's go to Man United then. Lots of suggestions for United players. Obviously, we're going to have to talk about him. It's Anthony. Pat, Anthony, I know you've just written a script on him. What are your thoughts? Are you going to be very negative or very positive?
Somewhere in between. I mean, for 100 mil, I'm extremely negative.
I agree.
This is insane. Like, I don't get it. Like, he's a promising player. That's kind of it. Like, you want a guy in the Eredivisie who's putting up insane numbers, basically, because of the competition in that league. And he got 12 goal involvements last season. He got 17 the year before. I mean, that's a pretty good rate, like, per 90. I think he's at a goal or assist every 115 minutes, which is good. Not as good as David Neres, who is now at Benfica. So that troubles me a little bit. He doesn't dribble all that much. Like, I was looking at his dribbles, and his success rate in the Eredivisie is like 57%, which I was like, that's okay. In the Champions League, it's like 38, 39%, which is the bottom 3% of wingers. So my concern is that when he gets up against real defenders, because they don't really have those in the Eredivisie, he is going to struggle with his take-ons. And if he loses the ability to beat people, then what have you got here? Big shot numbers, but lots of shots from outside the box. He really likes this zone. If you look at the box, like this corner here, and he's finished above XG from that position. So maybe that's luck or bad goalkeeping. Maybe it's skill. Who knows? And if it is skill, he's perfected that finish, then great. He does offer a bit of balance to United. Obviously, he can play on the right, and right now you've only really got Sancho who can play there. He's a left footer, which you don't have one of at the moment. So that's quite beneficial as well. But I just don't really know how we've ended up at this figure of 100 mil. Like,
I know.
As soon as United were quoted like north of 50, 60, they should have said no. And now we're hearing, okay, Wolves don't want to sell Pedro Neto, but it looks like he might be gettable for kind of 50. I think United should be all over that. I think he'd be a fantastic signing for them. So I just look at 100 mil. And I remember earlier in the summer, you were saying we don't have any money. And I think, if you've
got, come from?
If you've got 100 million, 40 mil on a winger, 40 mil on maybe another midfielder, and 20 mil either on a new right back or a new goalkeeper, something like that. That to
maybe
me,
a backup striker.
Yeah, that to me would be a much better use of the money. But I'm not saying he's a bad player. He's very young and he could become a star. But when I sign somebody from the Eredivisie, I want to know that they've been destroying, because people like Bergwijn absolutely destroyed in the Eredivisie. Yeah, and still Memphis didn't really shine in the Prem. So I fear for this one a little bit, especially because Ten Hag's bringing him in from his former club. It's a player he wants, and these things can then reflect on your credibility. So I don't know. It feels like a lot of pressure for a young man and a lot of money for not a lot of guaranteed production.
Yeah, the money is absolutely obscene. It is absolutely obscene. And I like I said earlier in the window, I didn't think we had much money after the signing of like a Casemiro and a Sandro. Where has this suddenly come from? If United had this money in the back pocket, why have we waited until the week before deadline day to spend it? Like, what was going on when United bid 8 million for Arnautovic? It's like, we've got 8 million for Arnautovic, then we've got actually just add 90 million on top of that and just get Antony. It's like, hang on, we had 100 million. What were we doing mucking around with Arnautovic at 8 million for then? It's totally bizarre. It's totally bizarre. I have to say, this is it feels very much anyway, driven by Erik Ten Hag, this one, as a lot of the recruitment does this summer, but I don't see a world in which if Erik ten Hag had joined the club, United would be paying 100 million for Antony. I think it's a crazy amount of money, and that's not, like Pat said, not to say he's a bad player. He might come in and be absolutely electric, but he's going to have to be for 100 million. They can't afford to come in and have a slow bedding in period where it's a bit hit and miss. 100 million euros. That's like third highest amount of money United have spent in the club's history. He has to be absolutely genius at that feat, in my opinion.
He's absolutely doomed to fail, to be honest. I mean, the amount of successful transfers of around that amount, you're looking at, Ronaldo going to Real Madrid, you're looking at Bale going to Real Madrid, you're looking at Mbappe going to PSG. Like, Antony is just not anywhere close to that level at the moment. Like, he has put in some excellent performances, particularly in the Champions League. But I remember listening to a podcast last year, and they said, often in the Eredivisie, he sort of phones it in a bit. He's not really as fully committed in the league as he is in the Champions League on that bigger stage. He's being signed in a position where I think United, are reasonably strong compared to other positions in the squad. So for me, this is a doom to fail. Poor guy. I actually feel quite sorry for him.
Let's carry on up the table then. Now we've spoken about Antony, we'll have to fly through some of these teams. Aston Villa, who are still hunting for a centre-back after the news that Diego Carlos has ruptured his Achilles tendon. He's out long-term. And obviously we saw earlier in the window that Steven Gerrard had benched Tyrone Mings. He stripped him in the captaincy. Now he's back in the team. It's all a bit bizarre, but it feels like they're chasing one. Dukes, anybody that you have seen linked that could happen?
I think it's been a little bit quiet on the Villa front, to be honest, but they definitely need something being sorted out. That team is not performing as it should be at the moment. That result against Crystal Palace, having taken a really early lead to Ollie Watkins, was really, really disappointing. And I just think on paper, they've got a better team than they're performing, which makes me worry about what's going on behind the scenes. And obviously there's lots of speculation that Michael Beale, who went to join QPR, was the sort of brains behind the sort of operation, at least on the training ground, was the guy that sort of conducted all their drills, came up with their strategy, etc. So that feels like an enormous loss. In terms of incomings at centre-back, I'm running a bit dry, to be honest. I thought Nat Phillips on loan could be an option. Again, that name coming back out. But yeah, no one really springs to mind for Villa. I think they're in a little bit of difficulty there.
Bingo Bob Holding. Agreed. 25 million bid coming in for Bingo Bob Holding. I guarantee it. Again,
not to just keep mentioning his name, but Philip Jones, the answer to everybody's problems from Manchester United here. I totally agree that I think Steven Gerrard is under big pressure. Aston Villa fans that I know are seething with Steven Gerrard, to put it lightly. Okay, let's go to Chelsea. Dino Halabisa says that the fans' choice is Ibrahima Sangare. Now, that's not going to be happening because he signed a new contract 2 weeks ago, I believe, Dino. And who they want shot of is Jorginho. Now, it still feels like there's a lot of business to be going on here at Chelsea. Pat, I want to come to you first with your thoughts on Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang at 30 mil.
No, don't do that. That's a terrible idea. I mean,
is it though? He's worked with Tuchel in the past. They need a goal scorer. It's not a huge fee for them, given that they're so rich.
It is a huge fee for anyone, and I mean, it's also about the length of the contract you give him. They have a hefty wage bill, Chelsea, and I presume they're going to have to give him at least a 2-year deal if they're going to pay 30 million, because otherwise, and then you're looking at wages plus the fee over 2 or 3 years. It's going to come to something like 15 million a year, like. Say if you give him a 3-year contract and he's on some huge amount of wages, like that's so much money, man. And I don't think he's totally like done. When he went to Barcelona, it didn't surprise me that he scored goals. I think there were some Arsenal fans who thought he'd never score a goal again. I think if he went to Chelsea, he'd score goals. But the attack isn't currently functioning. I don't really understand the theory that Aubameyang is going to get it functioning. Like, what's the issue here? Are they saying that nobody's getting in the box? Because I don't think that's been the issue for them at all. So I think the issue is that Mount isn't currently at it, and I think that they've completely reduced their creative kind of the spread of creativity through the side by moving Reece James to centre back. I think that's more of a question for them. I don't really see why they'd go for Aubameyang. His attitude's not great. He's not really going to press. He's not a good link-up player. If he goes there, he'll score goals, but I don't think he'll actually make the team better. Not a fan.
Yeah, I have to say, I think they're still kind of tentatively pursuing Frankie de Jong, though it seems more and more likely that he's going to stay at Barcelona unless something crazy happens. But yeah, I kind of agree. I think that the balance without Reece James as a wing back, and I have to say, I think Correa's a good player, but I think they miss Chilwell's attacking endeavour when he's not on the pitch. Like, I think this weekend you'll see Correa play at centre-back, obviously without Kalidou Koulibaly, who's banned, but even when he's playing, I don't know. I think I prefer Chilwell in the wing-back position than Correa, despite the fact they spent 60-odd million on him. Southampton, lots of chat about a Southampton striker, of course, at the moment, still slightly missing out on a goal scorer. The fans' choice, according to Ethan, Gonzalo Ramos. Dukes, anybody you think up front that could work for Southampton, given that Armando Broja still at Chelsea, still getting no minutes?
Yeah, I mean, he'd be a very good option for them. Gonzalo Ramos is a little bit bit early, maybe as a suggestion. He was linked with Newcastle a couple of weeks ago, but he's still pretty raw as, I think he's only 21, the Benfica striker. So he potentially needs a bit of time. I think there's been a lot of chat about Ainsley Maitland-Niles potentially going to Southampton, which I quite like in terms of, he'd add right-back depth until Tino Livramento is back, and then they could maybe put Kyle Walker-Peters back to the left, where he performed so well last year. He also can cover in central midfield. He can play on a sort of right midfield role as well. So I think Ainsley Maitland-Niles would be a reasonable pickup. But yeah, I think they should just go all out for Broja as well. Like, 6 league goals last year, didn't score after February, I believe, but was by far their most dynamic and consistent threat up front. They've actually spent a lot in the striking department over the last few years, of course, with Adam Armstrong and Shea Adams, and neither of which have ended up being the players that they probably thought they were going to be. So I think I'm being a little bit reluctant about going out and spending another £20 million on another striker. I think they need to make those players work. The good thing for Southampton is some of their new signings have actually started really well. I think Joe Aribo started pretty well, and Mara as well, the young Frenchman, or at least he was signed from France. I actually don't know whether he's French, that's my bad. But yeah, dropped in deep and played a lovely through ball. I think it was last weekend or maybe on match week 2, and he looks like a real talent as well. So yeah, potentially, I think Southampton will be around that 15th area once again, but I'd be reluctant to go big on a striker again.
Yeah, it's just such a young team, that Southampton side, isn't it? Like, the spine is so young. Bazuna's young, Salisu and Bella Kotchap are young. Lavia starting now over Oriol Romeu. Looks like he's going to leave the club. Like, Sekou Mara, like you said, is, I think, still only 20. So it is a young team. And that would be my biggest worry for Ralph Hasenhüttl, is that he does need some immediate results. He'll probably get one this weekend against Manchester United, who will come crashing back down to earth on Saturday at 12:30. Obviously, you'll be already knowing the result by the time this comes out. Let's go to Notts Forest then. They're up to, what is it now? 17 signings, I think?
They can't sign anymore,
17, 18. It seems, doesn't it, like Serge Aurier is potentially in talks with the club. I have to say, when I was there this week, getting told off by Steve Cooper, I was watching the training, and it didn't seem like a club that nobody knew each other. It seemed like a really good environment. Everybody knew exactly what they were doing. The business that they've conducted, I have to say, is voluminous. But I think it's some really good quality in there as well, Pat. What do you think of the business Forest have done, and do you think they need anybody else?
Well, I don't know if they need anyone else, but if they want to go and get Aouar, if they want to push that over the line, then they absolutely should. I mean, this is very like Paquetá to West Ham. This is a player who, no disrespect to Forest, but he should be out of the reaches of a team getting promoted from the Championship. He'd be amazing. I think he's kind of a superstar in waiting. So I would really like that move, but I don't know. I think that you don't want to push it too far. It feels like they've really beefed up that squad nicely. I think Awani is a good signing. I think Nico Williams is a good signing. Freuler in midfield is a great signing.
Sensational.
There are these guys, great, mate.
There are these guys all over. If they end up with a midfield of Freuler and Aouar and who's the other?
Mangala, maybe.
Sorry?
Mangala, maybe.
Yeah, Mangala, and then of course they've massively overpaid for Morgan Gibbs-White, but Morgan Gibbs-White is an option as well.
Good player as well, man. Fucking good player.
Well, and a player that the manager knows. I don't know, man. This is a pretty spicy squad. I'm really excited to see Forest kind of 2-3 months into the season, because while you say they don't look like they don't know each other, it is going to take some time to fully gel. I think that this is really high potential upside, this squad. So, yeah, get Aouar in. But what's really nice is that Forest came up with this incredible good feeling around the club. Their fans were so excited to be back, and so they should be. And that good feeling has just continued, you know, with a great window. And so I really hope that whatever happens, it doesn't descend into the kind of rancor that often you do get with newly promoted sides when maybe a few results don't go their way or a key signing gets injured. So I don't know. I think that Aouar would give them a little bit of kind of goal scoring stability as well. Say Awani got injured. But generally speaking, I really like their business.
Yeah, agreed. Crystal Palace then, slightly small squad at Palace, I would suggest at the moment. Obliv MC says the fans' choice is Conor Gallagher, who is getting minutes at Chelsea, but kind of feels a little bit out of place, dare I say. I'm not sure he quite fits into this Thomas Tuchel tactical setup, as we've seen is the case for a lot of players at Chelsea. You know, Christian Pulisic, case in point there as well. Crystal Palace, Dukes, any obvious additions you would make? Maybe add one more midfielder? I know that they're also interested in Houssam Aouar to the tune of about 15 million quid.
What is going on when Houssam Aouar is going to Palace or Nottingham Forest? It's absolutely nuts, but it just goes to show the state of Europe's finances right now in comparison to the Premier League. I think probably the area that I'd look at as an instant upgrade is probably right back. Yes. I know they were linked with Aaron Wan-Bissaka throughout this summer, but I think Man United were looking for too big a fee, or maybe they couldn't afford his wages, or something went wrong on that front. But yeah, I mean, the right backs available, it's pretty slim pickings around Europe right now. I know he's now joined PSG now, but someone like Nordi Mukiele, who can cover at centre-back or right-back, would have been a really interesting pickup for Palace. Maybe a little bit out of their price range, given the fact he's played Champions League football with Leipzig for the last few years and is now at PSG, as I already said. But he'd have been an interesting pickup, given the fact that he can cover in a number of positions as well. So right-back is probably the area that I'd be looking at ahead of deadline day.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not sure about the Wan-Bissaka links, though. I agree. Right back to replace Ward or an upgrade for Ward, but not sure on the Wan-Bissaka links. Don't know whether it's a good idea to go back. Do you know what I mean? When you go back, is it ever the same? Brentford up next then. James Gordon says the fans' choice, left back depth. Who they want shot of, Sergi Canos. Now, the thing about Brentford is like trying to predict transfers for Brentford is next to impossible, because you have all these names that you think like are good left backs potentially, and then they go and sign someone from
the Danish league,
from the Israeli division, and you're like, well, what's happened here? Pat, what do you think of the Brentford squad? Do you agree with James that left back potentially is an area to improve?
Well, they had Rico Henry playing there last season, and they brought in Aaron Hickey already this summer. I'm not sure what else they kind of want here. Isn't that what Hickey was brought in to be?
But he's been on the right.
Yeah, but he can play on it. Like, he is left back depth. Objectively, that is what he is. Sure, like if they want to go and do that, but I don't think that's really the Brentford way, right? I think they're going to say we trust the guys we've got. Though last season, Rico Henry, I've always liked him, but his numbers last season, he wasn't really impressive in any category. Like, not much of a dribbler, not creative, didn't put up big defensive numbers. Sure, if they want to go and do that. I have questions about Brentford's squad, but I sort of just back them to get the job done, because I think Thomas Frank is a fantastic manager.
Yeah.
So I'm not too worried. But like you say, I always feel with Brentford that I'm like, what is the point? What is the point? Like, they always have a bunch of guys in there I've never heard of who turn out to be great. They will always make some interesting tactical tweaks halfway through the season. Like, Brentford are just a solid side every year, and I think the main business for them this summer was keeping hold of some of their key guys, you know. They managed to keep Tony and Burmo and Norgard again. I expect to have a really good season. So, yeah, nothing really to say. I'm not knowledgeable enough about Brentford, I've got to say.
Yeah, let's go to Fulham then, because there are some very interesting players being talked about at Fulham here. I mean, Justin Cliver in particular name continues to pop up, doesn't he? Heavily linked with the club. Willian, I believe, is still training with the club, despite the fact they haven't offered him a contract at this stage. They wanted Neil Maupay as well, but he's gone to Everton instead. Now, I mean, from a Fulham fan's perspective, Justin Cliver on paper, Dukes, looks very good, given that he did have one of his better seasons at Nice last year.
Yeah, no, he did. He's had a slightly strange career. It's been very inconsistent.
Slightly? Insanely strange.
Yeah, it's been very inconsistent. Like, when he was coming through at Roma, or when he was at Roma, I should say, it looked like he was going to sort of emerge as one of the most exciting sort of young wingers around. It was a similar sort of time that Cengiz Ünder was looking really promising there as well, and he sort of meandered his way to Marseille and has done all right in the last couple of years, but not probably become the player we expected either. So Justin Kluivert is a slightly strange one. I think Willian would be an exceptionally strange move, to be honest.
Yeah.
That's another case of if you have a great game against someone, you're always in their heads. Like I remember Willian's, it was probably his only good game for Arsenal ever, was when they beat Fulham. I think it was 4-1 on the opening day of the season. And Willian was like exceptional that day. And everyone was like, oh, Willian, he's going to be a masterstroke for Arsenal. I was one of those included. I thought it was a good move when it happened, but it was just a disastrous spell at Arsenal. And then he was hated at Corinthians as well. Has gone to Fulham, is training there, but why haven't they offered him a deal if they're planning on it? I just think it's a slightly strange one from Fulham. But having said that, some of their business this summer already looks pretty promising. I think João Palhinha's started really well in midfield, and it's been nice to see Mitrovic just seamlessly adapt to the Premier League after having so many question marks over him. Because actually his record in terms of goals and assists prior to this season in the Premier League was actually pretty promising. He just had that reputation after that disastrous season the last time they came up under Scott Parker. So if I was a Fulham fan, I'd be slightly concerned with these links. I know they're linked with Layvin Kurzawa as well. And Henry Hill is trying to push Chris Wood to Fulham relentlessly. So it's not the sort of business that gets me particularly excited.
Yeah, and also a really poor result midweek as well, wasn't it? I think a really, really poor result, losing 2-0 against Bitcoin FC, Crawley Town. Let's talk about Newcastle next then, still climbing up the table. We may as well talk about him. Let's just bite the bullet, Pat. 70 million euros, Alexander Isak, yes or no? It's got a bit the Anthony's about it, isn't it? Big fee.
Yeah, it is a big fee, though at least, he has had at least one great season in a top league at a very young age.
True.
I mean, last year wasn't amazing. At his best, he's been about 0.5 expected goals and assists per 90, which is pretty good as a young guy. Though Sociedad are also a pretty good side. Very mobile, like really good on the ball. He doesn't get on the ball very much, but when he's on it, he's pretty effective. But a good dribbler, a big guy. I don't know. I think this is fine, but it does just sort of seem like I thought their attack was kind of okay. Like I still find it hard to imagine Eddie Howe not starting Wilson when he can. He's always going to want to, I think. But it's a sensible move for the future, and Newcastle have got the money, so I don't particularly have an issue with it. Why not go for it? It's again one of those moves where you're like, are we slightly overpaying for this player? Sure. But this is a guy who was linked with much richer clubs for a long, long time. So maybe this is our opportunity to steal a potential star.
Yeah, and also Wilson's already injured, already got a hamstring problem, and with 3 games in, so you just can't rely on him. And clearly Chris Wood, that is now fallen by the wayside. That kind of transfer seems more and more every day like it was literally done to scupper Burnley, which is totally fair enough because it kind of worked, didn't it? Any other options for Newcastle? I see them being linked with midfielders quite regularly. Edson Alvarez at Ajax. Surely that's not going to happen if they lose Anthony as well, because Alfred Schroeder may as well just start the season with the under-12s because his whole squad's been taken.
Yeah, that is a slightly strange one. I can't see that happening. A player that I saw who is willing to be sold, or is being sold this summer rather, by Benfica is Julian Weigl. And he's actually had quite a good spell at Benfica. He sort of rebuilt his reputation after falling out of favour after a bad injury at Dortmund. And I do think, eventually they'll need to replace Jonjo Shelvey for where they want to get to and in the next 2-3 years. I'm not sure Sean Longstaff is going to be a top midfielder either. If they got in Julian Weigl to act as that controller and then had Joe Linton and Bruno G as their sort of more dynamic midfield 8s, then I think that looks like a really strong midfield. All of a sudden, Newcastle's squad is, at least first team, is looking pretty good. Maybe a right winger as well. I was quite surprised they didn't have a cheeky look at Nicola Pepe. I do think there is a player in there at Nicola Pepe, and he's probably a Europa League level player. And I thought maybe a loan move for Nicola Pepe wouldn't have gone amiss.
Do you think that's because, though, he is do you think that's because he is notoriously his right wing at Eddie Howe, has got Alma on there, who is just an absolute dog, works and does all of Alan Saint-Maximin's running effectively. If you have a Saint-Maximin and a Pepe without having that dog-like figure, you lose all of your intensity and pressing in the final third.
That is true. Although Alexander Isak is actually a relatively good presser. And can play on right wing as well. He can play on the wing and pulls wide often. So maybe that's why they didn't initially go for Pepe. I suppose the question marks is a little bit around their formation that they're going to play, because you don't bring in someone for 70 million and then not start them. But is Callum Wilson going to be dropped either, as Pat says? I don't really see it. So are they going to change to a sort of 4-4-2 or a variation of that? I'm not quite sure, but it's a good option to have Alexander Isak. But I just think they could have maybe strengthened in more necessary areas for me, right wing and defensive midfield.
Okay, let's do Brighton then. Deadline day rapidly approaching for them, and they have sold one of their strikers in Neil Maupay. Of course, they've got a few through the door, including Ndav. But Alfonso Damon says that the fans' choice before deadline day would be João Pedro. Of course, the Watford striker that Newcastle were very close to agreeing a £30 million deal with before that collapsed because of the Alexander Isak move. Pat, Brighton strikers, yes or no? Do you think they need one, or is it just more hyperbole from the media?
No, I do think they need a striker. I mean, last season, Maupay got something like 2,200 minutes, and Welbeck got a load of minutes as well. And I love Danny Welbeck, but he's not particularly reliable. I think he got 6 goals last season, had about 8 XG. Like, I mean, he's a really good link-up player. He works incredibly hard. He's a great passer, actually. But yeah, I think they need a forward. I really like João Pedro, but I don't think he's going to solve an issue for them this season. To me, I don't know, maybe an interesting guy for them would be someone like Moussa Dembele from Lyon, because his numbers really rebounded last season. He's a guy who constantly been linked away. And to be honest, I think Lyon have been open to selling him for quite a long time. He was linked with Brighton before he ever went to France, actually. And I don't know, I feel like that would be quite a good move for them to make. Big shot numbers. He's just a consistent penalty box presence. And I've always been a bit of a Maupay defender, but they do need a striker if he's going out. And that is a guy, that's probably about as good a guy as they could hope to get. If not, then maybe they could rival Wolves for Kalajdzic. But Kalajdzic has not got the kind of track record of goal scoring that Dembele has. So I think that would be a really interesting move. And they at least know if he gets injured that Welbeck is totally capable of spotting him, and Trossard is a very consistent contributor from wide.
Yeah, I really agree. I think that's a really interesting shout. I'm sure there'll be people at home saying, well, why would Dembele leave, for Brighton? We're talking about Husmail potentially going to Forest. So absolutely anything is possible with the Premier League's involvement.
I've got another one for Brighton, actually.
Go on, Dukes.
It's another Ligue 1, Ligue 1, even not from Ligue 1. Ligue 1 suggestion. I think they could maybe have a look at Jonathan David. Like, I'm not sure he's going to get that move to a Champions League level club. And Lille, under Paulo Fonseca, they actually started the season pretty well, then got absolutely thrashed by PSG. Paulo Fonseca's still not great in sorting out big games and defences in those big games. Conceded a lot of goals at Roma. But Jonathan David, really interesting player, can play wide as well. He's been playing wide on the right a lot for Lille this year. And I'm not sure Lille are really going anywhere particularly fast. They've sold so many top talents over the last few years. Botman and Zaki Celik leaving this summer. And yeah, I don't think they're going to get back in the Champions League anytime soon. Do I see a top club going for Jonathan David? Not so much. But Brighton, if you go to Brighton for 2 years, they've already proved that they are willing to ship you on if the fee is right. Like it's part of their business model. So like we've seen with Basuma, we've seen with Cucurella. So Jonathan David is one I would definitely look at.
Nice. Okay, let's go to Tottenham then. Ben Ashley says before deadline day, the fans' choice would be Malinovsky, heavily linked with the club again at the moment. Pat, any thoughts on Tottenham's squad and where you would improve it, and would Malinovsky be a good option?
I mean, yeah, it'd be great. Again, it depends on the length of contract, because these are guys, when you're signing 29-year-olds, you've got to be careful that Conte doesn't lock you into a bunch of big contracts. Because I've seen here on the list as well that they want to loan out Pepe Matar. And then you feel like, is this going to be a situation where they yoke themselves to old guys and maybe lose some young guys because that's what Conte wants? And when Conte eventually leaves, they'll be like, oh, we really missed out. Because Sarr has looked incredible as a really young player in Ligue 1. I think Malinovsky would be fantastic for them. Huge creative numbers consistently. Genuinely, has the foot like a traction engine.
It's such a good shot.
He's got one of the purest strikes, I think, in the top 5 leagues. I'd really like this. This would be a really interesting presence for them. Obviously, earlier in the summer, linked with Eriksen coming back. So having Malinovsky play there, maybe behind a front two at times this season, would give them a really interesting option. Yeah, I like this a lot. I would absolutely do this depending on the length of the contract. But it sounds like the price would be fairly low. Other than that, they could always do with another centre-back. I don't really like the idea of Dyer starting pretty much every game as much as Conte likes him. I think there are quite significant weaknesses in his game. So that would be an option. And I still would... I know we've been talking about it for months and months and months, but I still, in my heart, would love to see Adama Traore under Conte. It just feels like if that doesn't happen, then we'll all go to our graves knowing that we missed something amazing. So I would still like to see them do that, but I guess it's not quite as... Is it a position of need? Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah, I think Malinovsky would be such an interesting signing, man. I think it'd be a hard deal to do, but I would imagine the player would be pretty keen on it.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's go to Major League Soccer then. Box 92 LUFC obviously made an incredible start to the season under Jesse Marsch, continuing where he left off at the back end of last season. Made some great signings that just seem to have slotted in like a glove. Obviously, particularly Brendan Aronson in the press, man. What has gone on there? The guy... How is he running so much? Against Chelsea, it was obscene. He was
relentless.
It was seriously, it's like watching Mo Farah out there. He was just sprinting around constantly. Suggestion from backs is Ivan Toney, which I think is just never going to happen. Brentford are not going to be selling their number one starting striker this late in the window to Leeds. But there are question marks in that striking department, aren't they? Obviously, Bamford already injured, spent the entirety of last season injured. I was listening to a Leeds podcast this week where he said that he only trained about 10 times last season, which really puts into perspective how bad his injury problems were, and he's already injured this season. Rodrigo has obviously been called up as part of the leadership group. Quite an interesting move by Jesse Marsch to give him the captaincy as well, actually. Apparently he came into the club, and obviously the three leaders in the group were Calvin Phillips, Patrick Bamford, and Liam Cooper. And I think Jesse Marsch basically felt that there wasn't enough representation of the wider squad in there. There was too many English voices in the group. So obviously with Calvin Phillips leaving the club, chose to promote Rodrigo to that role. And it seems like he's thriving, doesn't he, in that striking role. Obviously the top scorer in the Premier League so far. Looks really dangerous in and around the box. Continues to play as that sort of 9.5. But... and it's a big but, across the course of the season, I'm unconvinced he's the man to lead the line for Leeds. I do think if they can get a striker in before deadline day, Dukes, they should get a striker in before deadline day.
Really, I'm sort of less convinced. I think I'd keep things as they are, to be honest. As you say, their new signings have really hit the ground running. I think Mark Rocker and Tyler Adams have instantly sort of formed a connection in midfield as well. As you say, Brendan Aronson. The probably area I'd look at more is maybe centre-back, because whilst I do rate particularly Diego Llorente, they're all quite injury prone in there. Like Robin Koch, very injury prone, Pascal Struijk, Diego Llorente, Liam Cooper obviously. Like, you want someone that you can rely on to play sort of 30 league games per season upwards. So I'd maybe look at a centre-back. But as for their forward line, I'd sort of keep it as it is. It's nice seeing Jack Harrison back on form as well after a disappointing second year in the Premier League. But he looks full of energy once again. He's got really good quality from wide areas as well. But yeah, I think I keep the Rodrigo train going, and then when Bamford is back fit, which hopefully he manages to keep fit as well, I think they're looking pretty good.
Absolutely, definitely looking pretty good. Let's go to Manchester City then. Last couple of clubs climbing up the table rapidly before we hit the pinnacle of Patrick Van Straten's Arsenal. Man City from Sky Blue for the win 22 says the fans' choice is Theo Hernandez. Can we just be real? Let's just say now we can guarantee Man City just don't sign anyone for deadline day. It's also, not going to happen.
Theo Hernandez is not really a sort of Pep-style player, in my opinion at least. He's like a really dynamic ball runner. From deep, like he's excellent. He just goes through like an absolute bullet through any defence. Really energetic, but I couldn't really see him. I can't really imagine him averaging like 80 passes a game. Personally, if they were going to look at left back, which they're not going to do now, I think Rafael Guerreiro from Dortmund. I think he's only got 1 year left on his contract. I've been peddling this for months, but he just feels like a Pep player, like a player born to play under Pep. He's so good technically, can play in a range of positions as well, which I think would be quite helpful. Basically, like a Zinchenko. With that versatility. and he's got a hell of a lot of quality as well. So if I was going to sign anyone, it'd be Rafael Guerreiro. But as you say, I think they're done for the summer.
I think Lissandro Martinez would have been amazing for Pep as well in that sort of inverted fullback role, because they were so inverted against Newcastle. It was almost like a 2 centre-back, 2 defenders, then 3 deep-line midfielders more than it was fullbacks, and obviously got exploited at a stage by the brilliant San Maximin.
Yeah.
But
Kyle Walker was all over the place.
I know, but they're so inverted. They're not even fullbacks at this stage, man, really, are they? Pat, just before we move on to your beloved Arsenal, just to touch on Bernardo Silva. Obviously, we saw the reports this week that PSG had a bid in the region of 70 million rejected. Is there any sort of money that you would take for Bernardo, or do you want him part of the team this season?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think every player kind of has their price. Like if somebody offers you like £100 million for a player, as we've said a million times before, £100 million players very rarely succeed. So you might as well take it, because normally the team that gets the money gets the better end of that deal. However, I obviously would not want to sell him. He's very important to that squad. He's a really good hybrid player. He's a great build-up player. He's incredibly influential in the press. I just don't see it happening. I have no idea why they'd sell him, and I certainly have no idea why they'd sell him at basically market rate as opposed to an enormous markup. Like, he is just a guy who I'd say, give us 120 mil and we'll do it. But otherwise, why bother?
Especially this late in the window. Let's go to Arsenal then, finishing us off with Alicia Osingo's suggestion of the fans' choice. Gilmore, Pat.
What?
Billy Gilmore?
Billy Gilmore.
Which fan wants that?
Yeah, no fan wants
Alicia.
That. That's a Chelsea fan saying that. Look, I think we should probably just sign all the guys who haven't won a league title and otherwise will retire without winning one. You know, like Marco Reus, Harry Kane. They're never going to win a league title. Bring them into Arsenal and they can pick one up this season. I think this person's right in that they've identified central midfield. Like, obviously, we're talking a lot about wingers at the moment, and I think we probably will get a winger now that Pepe's gone to Nice on loan. Pedro Neto, really interesting link if you could get him. But yeah, it's always felt like midfield is a much bigger area of need. Obviously, there are certain players who I would very much like out of the club. So I think having some depth in central zones would not be the worst idea in the world. I'd like somebody who could play as a 6 and maybe also play as an 8. That would be pretty good business, I think. So I guess I'd focus on that if it came down to me. But those are the areas that. But I think it's really going to be a winger if we do anything between now and deadline day.
Well, you've wanted a winger all summer, really, given that Rafinha was... that initial bid went in like June, didn't it? And we're still talking about signing a right winger now. And Pepe's left the club. I think that Pedro Neto deal is just so good. I said it on stream last week. I think if the Pedro Neto deal gets done, I don't know about you, Dukes, but I think that Arsenal have had by far and away the best window of any Premier League club.
Yeah, and they just did it so early as well. It just makes such a difference. They had a full pre-season pretty much with all their new signings. Pre-season went exceptionally well. They've had great fixtures so far, but they've got great fixtures coming up as well. I think only Man United in their next 3 games, you probably not expect them... Well, you probably expect them to be Man United at the moment, but still, it's not like an easy fixture per se. The player I'd probably look at, and I think this is maybe one for next summer, is Coop Miners from Atalanta, because he can cover at centre-back, but he is an excellent distributor at the base of midfield as well. Can probably play that Xhaka role a little bit more effectively than Xhaka in many ways, I think. I wonder whether at some stage as well, he just feels like a player that would be great at Arsenal as well. Michael Olise from Crystal Palace.
Yeah.
I know he's really struggling to get fit at the moment, but say Bukayo Saka, left. I know no Arsenal fans wants to hear that, but in the next 2 years, maybe he will start interesting, top clubs, which if Arsenal haven't, really kicked on, consistently getting Champions League finishes, maybe picking up a couple of trophies, then I can see Saka being like, I need to fulfill, my talent. And maybe that is at another club. Bring in Michael Olise. I love that move.
Pat, I also want to throw one more name at you. What about Memphis Depay? I know he doesn't classically play off the right, but he can play kind of all across the front line. It's available for like 5 mil this summer, if you believe reports in Spain.
I mean, I wouldn't dislike it. I think, obviously he offers a lot of versatility. But clearly we re-signed Eddie Nketiah at pretty great expense this summer with the intention of saying you're going to get a ton of minutes this season. On the left, we've got Martinelli, we've got Smith Rowe, We've got Fabio Vieira, who's going to come in at some point and can play in the wide position as well, though I wonder if he's going to be in a 3-man midfield. I don't really know. I mean, if Memphis is available for that little and you can get him on a short contract for reasonable money, then I think, yeah, that would be absolutely great. But it's always felt like there are things Arsenal had to do this summer and things that they were kind of like, oh, if an opportunity comes up. And so it felt like Rafinha was just an opportunity that they felt they had. Now it feels like an obligation because Pepe's gone. So, yeah, if you can't get anything and you're going into the last day of the window and you're like, God, we're light, then something like that wouldn't be the worst idea.
Yeah, I really agree. All right, so there we go. We've looked at all 20 Premier League sides and had a look at some of the predictions for business to get done before deadline day. Dukes, is there anything you want to push to before we wrap this up?
Yeah, why not? So on Wednesday, I got the opportunity to interview the Shakhtar Donetsk captain ahead of the Ukrainian Premier League returning. That was organised by Pitching for Ukraine, which is an amazing charity that supports the victims of that horrendous Russian invasion, which is still ongoing. So go check out that video on Eurofootball Daily on Wednesday. And if you're feeling generous, donate to a very worthwhile cause as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd suggest go and do the same thing. Pat, anything you want to shout out?
No, I don't think so. I think that sounds like something we should give our attention to instead.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, there we go. Another episode of Sunday Vibes in the can. If you enjoyed it, hit like, hit subscribe. Thanks very much for watching, everybody. See you later. Bye.